Before I speak, I want to say it's come to my attention that apparently my email is bouncing back. So if you send me an email and it bounces back, contact the church administrator. It's just one of the few things that, just little things that got to figure out. There's, there's, the thing that you have to be when you're a preacher is that you just have to decide you're going to roll with whatever happens. I also want to thank all the people from the property committee who showed up yesterday to do work around the building, and to Jan Austin Scott, who came to set up everything out here, and for everybody who's pitched in for that. This is a great congregation. So the Gospel of John and the three letters known as 1 John, 2 John, and 3 John, creative, came from a network of churches located in Asia Minor that were called the Johannine community. It was through this community that Samaritans became active members of the growing Christian movement. And Samaritans were not particularly liked by the Jewish community. And tradition has it that at the heart of this community was a person who was named equal to the apostles, Fotini, the enlightened one. Fotini was known to be a significant figure in this community and was responsible for the spread of Christianity. In Greek sermons from the 4th to the 14th centuries, Fotini was often compared to the male apostles, and the male apostles, were always found wanting. She was canonized and is celebrated every February in the Orthodox Church. We know her as the woman at the well. It was late in the day. The sun was high. It was not time to draw water, but drawing water was an activity that women had to undertake every day. They usually gathered at the well in the morning. It was cooler. They could help one another. They could visit. They could exchange news. They could keep each other safe. They offered protection from predatory men and made certain that they were never found questioned by a community that had very strict rules for women. Women were not alone in public. If they were assaulted, the outcome for them wasn't good. But this woman came alone late in the day to do this back-breaking chore. Certainly, she would have avoided the eyes of the man sitting by the well. She never would have engaged him in conversation. You see, Jews at this time found Samaritans repulsive. Some Jewish men would even blindfold themselves and were guided about town so as to keep their eyes from being sullied by especially the sight of a Samaritan woman. The woman knew she was hated by the Jewish man at the well. We can assume she understood herself to be outcast even by her own people. After all, she came alone, without the protection of the other women. She came under the brutal heat of the day. Even though the solitude and the heat made her job more unpleasant and potentially dangerous, she didn't have to endure judgment and shame that she surely would have encountered had she gone about her work at the same time as the other good Samaritan women would have been doing in the morning. We think that her multiple marriage and the hint of fornication rendered her an outcast. Approaching the well with a Jewish man sitting nearby surely was uncomfortable for her and perhaps even dangerous. No proper Jewish man would have been anywhere near a Samaritan woman. or even near where it was known that Samaritan women would gather. But she had a task that needed to be done, so she went ahead with purpose. She couldn't ignore him, but she was not about to get close enough to hand him anything. Yet Jesus speaks to her and asks for a drink. Hoping to shut him up, she mocks Jesus, saying, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where do you get this living water? You're not greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock." Undeterred, Jesus tells her that he has access to water that will quench her thirst forever, a spring of fresh water, a spring of eternal life. One might think at this point the woman would have picked up her jug and walked away, but she needed water, and something about what Jesus said stopped her in her tracks. Perhaps it was just that he even spoke to her. And she asks him to tell her more. What did she have to lose, really? She was an outcast. She'd been compromised by the restrictive options in her society. She'd been married multiple times, and we don't know why. But we do know that without a husband or another male relative to take care of her, her options were limited. Regardless, she had no community and no hope. Even her daily chores were marked by lonely shame. She had nothing to lose, and she stayed and talked. This was not just a passing conversation. This is the longest recorded conversation that Jesus has with anyone. It comprises most of the 4th chapter of the Gospel of John. It is with a woman who holds her own in the conversation. It is with a woman from a disrespected social class. It is with a woman that is from a disrespected social class, and it takes place in a very inappropriate way, without a chaperone. This is a conversation about breaking boundaries, about facing life head on, about taking risks and seeking life, seeking God. All of us are born, I believe, with a desire to seek God. Now, we may not call it that. We might say that we search for meaning, for purpose, for direction. We might say that we wonder about the transcendent. We seek to fill this desire throughout our lives. We might follow ideals or paths that ultimately prove untrue. We might be like the Samaritans of whom Jesus spoke and worship what we do not know. We might follow a false God or turn the teachings of Jesus into an exclusive and restrictive club. Or we might try to fill this desire for God with food or drugs or entertainment or status or casual hookups or any number of things that never fill us and leave us broken, alone, ashamed, empty, and still seeking to satisfy that place which only can be filled by the divine. Jesus never calls this woman a sinner. He just notes that she's had 5 husbands and is living with a man who isn't her husband. He tells her he knows who she is and that she's sought long and hard to fill that void, but obviously hasn't done it. It wouldn't have mattered because she was a sinner. The word to sin is translated in the same in both Greek and Hebrew, and it means to miss one's mark. It doesn't mean to break or transgress the law. It doesn't mean that you're terrible. It just means that you set out to accomplish one thing and you didn't do it. You missed it. We don't know why the Samaritan woman had so many husbands. People died early 2,000 years ago. There were no vaccines or antibiotics. There were battles. A woman without a husband, especially if she had no family who could take care of her, was in a desperate position. She may have had a string of unlucky marriages and now is in a place where no one would consider her marriage material. But she found someone who would provide a roof over her head and food in exchange for wifely duties, including the difficult work of drawing water every single day. Give me that water of which you speak. I really don't want to come here every day. I don't want to live this lonely, outcast life. I'm doing all I can to get by. I think I'm doing the right thing, and yet here I am, poor, working like a pack animal, and judged by people who, with one or two bad turns in life, could find themselves exactly where I am. But here I am, alone in the sun, doing back-breaking work and judged for it. The woman continued her conversation, and she left inspired. Her thirst was quenched and the void was filled. And legend has it that she began a great ministry and spread the gospel far and wide. Before her encounter with the divine, she tried to fill her desire for God, for the divine, for meaning, purpose, direction, for the transcendent, by being what society said she had to be, a wife, even if it meant living with a man who wasn't her husband, even if it meant living scorned and ashamed. We've all had the experience of searching for living water, times when our lives were parched, when our imaginations were barren, when finding the next right step was elusive. We've all had the experience of looking at others and wondering what in the world they're doing, seeing so clearly that they're missing their marks, not because they're wrong or bad people, but because we see them on a spiral of self-destructive decisions that lead them further and further and further from fulfillment, continuously missing their marks. As a congregation, how do we become bearers of this living water? Gone are the days when a church was just built and people arrived. The average American is bombarded with between 6,000 and 10,000 advertisements every single day. The possible entertainment options at one's fingertips are legion. People seeking God must see fruits of our labors. People seeking God must know that we carry a little bit of this living water with us. People seeking God must see that within our community, when someone is without that water, others are there to bear them. To be of interest to others, to be of consequence and to help others, what we say and what we do must be as vital as daily water in an arid land. Today, we live in a time when elected officials are legislating morality. We're naming people as outcasts, as wrong, as unrighteous, as unclean. Women here in our state with ectopic pregnancies who must have them in will suffer infertility or maybe death or be treated like criminals because they cannot get the health care they must have. Performers in outlandish costumes might be able to face felonies in the near future while teenagers can carry weapons. If we want to be bearers of living waters, we are going to have to be as daring as Jesus at that well in the midday sun, talking to someone his peers would have ignored. Fotini's life was transformed because she found what she was seeking, living water. Living water isn't stagnant. Living water does not remain the same from 1 minute to the next. Living water is beautiful and living water is terrifying. Living water stays fresh and can cut through eons of stone. Just look at the Grand Canyon. Our mission must be one that is carried on living water. If we cling to the ways and the methods of days gone by, we cling to piers set firmly in man-made ponds that are sinking. Everything around may be comfortable and known, but the living water of God flows on and cuts through and changes and transforms. It moves, creating new landscapes, opening new passageways, and washing the grime from people's vision so they may see the holy before them, the holy alongside them, the holy behind them, the holy bearing them. I pray that we will find that font of living water and that we may worship God in spirit and truth. Amen.